Hi, I'm Dave Eck, the Photon Fanatic on Twitter, Instagram, and Astrobin. Today I'm going to give you an overview of my iOptron log viewer Windows application. You might be wondering why I decided to write the iOptron log viewer application. Well, iOptron Commander writes a nice log file every time you connect it to your iOptron mount, and that log file contains lots of useful information. It's basically a record of what your mount was doing during your imaging or viewing session. I've got one of the log files open here, and you can see that it's not terribly readable by mere mortals. iOptron's log format is documented in a document that's on their website, so you can use that to translate all of this into useful information. You can see, for example, that there's a three-letter command like GEP followed by a bunch of digits, and encoded in the digits could be any number of different types of information, but you need the manual and a calculator and some character counting in order to figure it all out. So I thought, why not write some software that does that translation for you automatically and gives you the log file in a form that's more human readable. So that's what I did. Let's go ahead and grab the application and get it installed. To do that, you need to go to my website, which is xfiles.net. That's EKSFILES.net. Click on the iOptron log viewer link across the top of the web page. That'll take you to the applications page. You can scroll through the summary and the screenshots and find the download link here. So click on that. It downloads as a zip file. It's not a very big file. It's only 1.2 megabytes. So let's unzip the setup program from the zip file. And then let's run it. If you get this message from Windows, just click on the More Info link and then click on Run Anyway. And here's the installer. Go ahead and accept the license agreement. Click on Next. Click on Next. Accept the default installation path. You can create a desktop shortcut if you'd like. Click on Next and then click the Install button. Installation doesn't take very long. And then click on Finish and you're all done. To run the application, just double-click on the desktop shortcut. And here's the application. Let's go ahead and open one of the log files. And these log files are located under users, your username, app data, local, iOptron Commander 17 logs. I'm going to open this one that's almost 3 megabytes in size. You can see on the status bar, the application is telling you the count of log entries as it reads them. I'm running on a pretty slow machine here. You should get better performance, but I'm going to go ahead and speed up the video until we have completely loaded the log. Okay, so this log file contains over 40,000 entries. The top half of the application window shows you the list of entries, and you can scroll through that. You can select an entry, and then on the bottom half of the application window, we have two tabs, the Command Summary tab and the Playback tab. The Playback tab basically shows you the status of the mount at the time of the log entry that happens to be selected. So you can do a crude playback of the log simply by clicking one of the entries in the list and then holding the down arrow button. You can see there's not a whole lot going on at this point in the log because the mount hasn't even started tracking yet. We'll look at more of that in just a second, but let's look at the Command Summary tab. So for whatever log entry happens to be selected in the list above, it will give you a summary of that log entry. It'll show you the command date and time as well as the response date and time from the mount, the raw command that was sent to the mount, the raw response that was received from it, and then the translated human readable form. This particular command, GAC, stands for Get Altitude and Azimuth. You can see there are no arguments passed to the mount, but the mount responds with the altitude and the azimuth of the mount at this particular time. So I mentioned a playback capability a moment ago, so let's look at that a little bit more. First, I'm going to scroll down into a more interesting part of the log where the mount is actually doing something, and I'm going to switch over to the playback tab. And you can see at this point we have a right ascension, declination, the side of pier is the west, status is tracking. You can see that the UTC latitude and longitude are reported, and that the altitude and azimuth gauges are reporting the altitude and azimuth of the mount. One thing to keep in mind about altitude and azimuth in particular is that these gauges only get updated when the mount gets queried for its altitude and azimuth, and depending upon which software you happen to be controlling the mount with, that may or may not happen very often. So be aware that the altitude and the azimuth shown in the gauges here may not actually reflect the current state of the mount. So that's one shortcoming of what happens to be in the log file itself. But let's go ahead and click on the log entry and then hold down the down arrow key on your keyboard, and you can kind of see a playback here. Although the screen doesn't seem to be updating very often, it will actually show you changes as they occur. So you can use this to kind of watch what the mount is doing as you proceed through the log file. It gets more interesting if you find a section where there's a meridian flip or a mount slew or something like that. So this gives you the ability to kind of play back what was going on in the mount during the session if you're looking for some particular section or some particular problem. So the last thing to mention is that you can actually save the human readable form of the log file. If you go up to the File menu, click Save As, and then find where you'd like to save it. I'm going to save it to my desktop, and I'm going to call it log.txt, and you can see that it's saved there. And now if I open that using Notepad, you can see that the log file has actually been translated into something that's readable. And you can use Notepad's features to search and find different things within the human readable log file. Much more readable than the original format, which looks like that. So that's pretty much it in a nutshell. The application isn't terribly complicated or difficult to use. If you have any feedback for me, you can go back to the applications page on my website and leave a comment in the comments section. Aside from that, hope you find it useful, and thanks for watching.